Namaskaram, hello and welcome to episode number 5 of Ask Abhijit. As always, it's a pleasure to have you on our channel, Abhijit. Abhijit Doron Iyer Mitra is here to answer your questions, and we're going to set the context a little bit today on the OTT, but that doesn't mean that you cannot ask questions about other topics. You're most welcome to, but we thought that OTT would be a good starting point given how strong we all have views on what we want to see on OTT. Abhijit, welcome to PGurus channel.
Vetrivel, thank you for having me here.
Vetrivel to you, Abhijit. And Abhijit, I have been a consumer of online content for about 8-10 years, I think. In fact, I started with Netflix when they used to ship out, CDs and DVDs for watching, and then they graduated to the online platform and so on. So I've grown with this, and I've seen how Netflix has grown by leaps and bounds, and then Amazon Prime came along. There was Hulu, there's Disney now, there is Apple, a lot of things. These are all not there in India. For India's context, let us try to keep two bins just to make it easy. Amazon and Netflix is one bin. The other bin being the ones that are homegrown, MX Player. There is Z. There's a whole bunch of them. Hotstar, blah blah blah. I don't even have the names for all of them. Suffice to say that we would like to try to keep them in two bins. And the one standout in India, as far as I know, is mxplayer.in because it is free. You see, the rest of the things you have to pay a subscription, but I believe, I don't know at this point if it's still free or not, but I'm just telling you context. I have not watched it recently. I have watched some things in mxplayer.one. The one that I kind of found very interesting was The Bull of Dalal Street. And this is sort of styled after The Wolf of Wall Street, if you will, and Leonardo DiCaprio's movie. And it had a lot of steamy stuff. That's all I can tell you. And as far as on the Amazon side is concerned, I really liked this series called The Family Man by Manoj Bajpayee as the lead. Priyamani, excellent pairing. And unfortunately, the ending is not something that I would really be happy about, but the series in itself was very good. So I have seen some, and whether I would like to see some regulation, my take on this regulation stuff is you should let the market decide, the players decide how they would like to regulate themselves rather than having the government come in and do it. This is just my 2 cents. You can give me what you think it should be, how it should be done, and then we can throw it open for questions.
So, first, I've never particularly been outraged by anything I've ever seen on TV. Excuse me. At best, I can say I've been outraged that I pay subscription for something so bad. If I watch something particularly uninteresting, but other than that, never. So, I generally question how useless you must be to outrage about make-believe. That said, I'm not entirely sure. See, in a country where the state has the monopoly of violence, as a rule, freedoms are greater. In a country like India, where the state has never acquired the monopoly of violence, even in a place like Delhi, where you can have riots happen on Republic Day, literally within a kilometer or 2 kilometers of where the Prime Minister and the nuclear button are sitting. For a country like that to not have regulations on what content is aired is particularly problematic. Now, the issue is, how are all these OTT things being implemented? And it turned out it was guidelines. Right? It isn't actually a mandatory set, which is why the Supreme Court has told them to go back and pass this as a law. And which kind of shows you that the government is also not very keen, despite all their supporters being crushed by all. And, they've conflated OTT with social media in the entire this thing. So in spite of their supporters taking the biggest hit, Remember, most of these people in the government are in the pocket of these social media and these OTT companies, because their budgets are huge, the amount of bribes they can give are huge, or the amount of access. Usually in this government, it's never bribes, it's access. It's this need to be, you'll always be the small town boy who'll never be given admission into the St. Stephen's Club or into the modern school Barakhamba Road Club and things like that. So it's this desperate need for social validation, which is why they don't do certain things. But that's fine. What's happened is the Supreme Court has now said you pass this as a law, and they'll have to do this as a law now. And I kind of support it.
Well, we have to see how the law takes form and shape. Certainly, in the United States, what they did was they said if you have some content which is perhaps explicit, you have to say it so right at the beginning, and therefore the viewers have the discretion to keep the children out of viewing it and so on and so forth. But if the child herself or himself tunes in, I don't know if anybody can stop it, because these days video content is available in your phone. So that we'll have to wait and see how that plays out, Abhijit. So let us jump right into questions. We have a whole bunch of questions here. Vaibhav wants to know, thank you for doing these Q&A sessions. What are the differences between the Patriot and S400 system, and which one would you pick and why?
Simple answer is I'd pick neither, and I'll tell you why. See, both of them are essentially anti-ballistic missile systems. The problem is, if you, I can't explain the problems of ballistic missile interception without using graphics. But basically, the system is it is a quality system, not a quantity system. The problem with it is you need great quality in great quantity. So you have to end up bankrupting yourself just buying a comprehensive shield, right? It's okay having one or two systems around your capital to protect the leadership when a nuclear when a nuclear attack has to be launched, to give them those 15-20 minutes to escape away to safety or whatever it is. But as a rule, even in the first Gulf War, you saw they were able to intercept some missiles, not most of those missiles. And remember, those were notoriously inaccurate Scuds. The general Scud accuracy has improved quite significantly, I must say, because technology has become easier and easier to access, and you have many ways of guiding missiles these days. But even then, unless you go in for a massive theater high altitude, it's called THAAD in America, it doesn't really work. It's too expensive for the amount of returns you get. It is still not at a technology stage where India can afford it. Now, the difference between the Patriot and the S400 is very simple. The S400 works brilliantly when it's a part of a system of systems, because they have a multi-layered air defense system. So you have the S400 at the top. Under that, you have the SA-11. Under that, you have the SA-15, and then you've got the Panzer or the Tunguska, whatever you want to call it. And at the lowest level, it includes guns and short-range missiles. At the highest level, it goes up to 400-500 kilometers. The S-500 goes up to 500 kilometers. With the Patriot, it's more like an all-purpose system. It can work as a standalone up to a point, as in the number of tiers you need are reduced. At most, you say maybe need a few close-in protection systems for the missile thing. It's more diverse. But then when you look at the American ballistic missile shield, they still need about 4 or 5 different kinds of missiles to do the entire job. Right? So you're looking at a kind of layering that's almost entirely useless. And for a country like India, I would say it's probably just, and even that interception, it stops at a certain point. The point that it stops at is, if the missile is more than, say, 1,500 kilometer range, you probably won't be able to intercept it at all, because the terminal speed will be too great. It's like trying to shoot a bullet with a bullet. It can be done with extremely precise calculations and things like that, but the cost of it is just ridiculously, just way too high to make it worthwhile. So each one has its benefits and each one has its negatives. I personally don't think either of them suits India.
Thank you for that. And the next question is, would you prefer F-18 Super Hornet over Rafale and others? What makes it better than the competition?
Yes and no. Had we gone in for it in the first competition, I would have said yes. Pick the F-18. Why? Because the F-18 has a much broader range of weapons, and you can use it for both the Air Force and the Navy. So it would have made. Plus, it's got a dedicated electronic warfare version, and it's significantly more advanced in terms of development cycles. Plus, the most important thing is America has the most sophisticated electronic spying system. And the benefit of that spying system is they collect all the electronic signals and convert it into jamming signals. So you can be assured a much greater level of self-defense in the Hornet. Now, other than the fact that it fulfilled two roles, Air Force plus Navy, three roles, Air Force plus Navy plus electronic warfare, the one big negative of it was the Americans were never going to let you integrate it with anything that was nuclear compatible, which the French will. Remember, the Mirage 2000 is our primary nuclear strike platform, not the Sukhoi, it is the Mirage 2000. And when you look at air-based systems, and what happens is that the French were kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, we let you do it. So they've let us do it in the Rafale. They won't, the Americans will never let us do it. MTCR or no MTCR, they will allow us to breach, well, now we're a member of MTCR, so they'll allow you to have long-range missiles on it, but they will not allow you to have nuclear-tipped missiles on it, which, is, the Rafale was a different thing. So now that you've bought Rafale, please stick to the Rafale. There's no point of going in for a second fighter, this thing.
Chaitanya Jha wants to know, how did Chandragupta Maurya and Chanakya manage to defeat the powerful Nanda dynasty?
I really don't know. I really don't know. I'm sorry, but you'll have to watch that serial, whatever it was, Chanakya, and read Amatya Rakshas. I mean, as much as I enjoy Amatya Rakshas, it's mostly fiction. So yeah, you're asking the wrong person the question.
Shweta wants to know, what is your opinion on the
Sorry,
entire...
just to add quickly to that, just to add quickly, the main reason is there is no historical sources. Whereas with the Arthashastra and with the governance of the Mauryan Empire, we have a lot of sources archaeological. With the Nandas, I'm yet to see any serious archaeological sources. So that's my main issue in answering that question. I don't want to give you a literary answer.
Thank you. And the next question is from Shweta. What she wants to know is, what is your opinion on the entire Rashmi Samant Oxford issue? What can Hindu students in foreign universities do to counter the vicious anti-Hindu propaganda? And this is getting really, really vicious, by the way.
Pretty much nothing you can do. Keep your head down, just study, don't get involved in student politics, finish your studies. Then maybe you'll get the upper hand in about 15 to 20 years, but I see no relief for you, at least for the next 15 years minimum. Ultimately, this woke movement, like all revolutions, will eat its own children. And when that happens, when it actually starts threatening the elites, that is when it will be crushed. Till then, just bide your time, keep quiet, hear no evil, see no evil, or do no evil.
Prasanna Bhatt wants to know, on the OTT, what are the other nations doing? Do any other relevant nation have a reasonable policy regarding these OTT platforms?
No, not that I've studied it. See, again, when we talk about OTT, the problem is they've merged OTT with social media. Social media is the biggest problem. And that there you have several different countries with several regulations. The EU is forcing Facebook, Twitter, Google, and all of them to share their search algorithms and their general content moderation algorithms with the government. In Poland, there's probably the harshest laws that if you suspend or block somebody on suspend their account, you have to pay 2.2 million euros in fines per day, because it's deemed a violation of their freedom of speech. And so they have to be very, very clear. Right now, they never make their policies clear. They just retain an arbitrary right to kick you off as and when they require to. So that in terms of visually blocking channels, TV channels, let's call them that, TV channels, you have European laws that will not allow, say, for example, Holocaust denial. You will not have TV channels that show certain kinds of violence, for example. In Arab countries, it's quite different, the regulations, but I don't think we want Arab countries as our guiding thing for censorship out here. At the same time, it's probably that we're much more closely tied in with Arab countries in terms of our social tolerance than we are with, say, Europe in that sense, in terms of the way content can ignite violence. Actually, Arab countries are way ahead of us, because if you get violent in Arab countries, in at least the developed Arab countries, they'll be hell to pay for. So there is no exact model out there.
Next question is from Asif Rockstar. He has two questions. The first one is, what is Sadat, S-A-D-A-T, Turkish equivalent of Blackwater, doing in Pak-occupied Kashmir? Any idea?
Not the faintest idea. This is the first time hearing about it. Thank you for telling me. I shall find out and ask the same question next week. I'll answer it.
Wonderful. And the next question is, what are the significance of Agalega base and Farcore base strategically?
Agalega?
And yeah, Agalega. And Farcore, Farkhor.
Farkhor, though I know, but Agalega, it was anyway. So those two bases, they very frequently, I think he's talking about the two Indian bases just north of Afghanistan in Tajikistan. Look, there's, or is it Kyrgyzstan? I forget now. I've been to those surrounding areas. You're not allowed near the bases. They're two separate areas. They very frequently get conflated because they're very close to each other. The problem is you're not allowed there, so I couldn't do any primary visiting of the base or even looking into the base or anything like that. They seem to be primarily electronic signal posts, electronic intelligence gathering, which now isn't even happening because the Russians have huge issues with us operating out of there. We wanted to station MiG-29s out there. The Russians said, no, you can't. This is our backwater. Screw you, get lost. So we couldn't do that. And that has been the end of it. There has been no further movement out there. They're essentially, for all effects and purposes, as I understand it now, they are dead.
I thought Kyrgyzstan was not part of the Russian Federation, are they?
No, they were part of the USSR. No?
Yeah,
Russian
but now,
Federation, none of these countries are part.
Yeah,
no, nobody's part of the Russian Federation. Russian Federation doesn't have a border there. But Russia, this is Russia's zone of influence.
Okay. So they still say sit and these guys sit, and they say stand, these guys.
Basically, the thing is, we don't do anything out there without Russian blessings.
Next question is from Sanjay Vedachalam. Could India build top-tier institutes like Harvard and MIT? If possible, how? If not, how could we increase our human capital?
Right now, you probably can build one. The question is, who's going to run it? Because anybody who isn't blessed by the left is deemed a quack, is deemed an academic quack. And anyone who's blessed by the left will essentially turn it into another GNU.
No, but that would also be a quack. That is a certified quack. If the left blesses
here's the
them.
issue. It's quack or quack. It's a quack or quack. And the problem there is that you can probably build it in the sciences, but I think people don't realize. You should bring Anand Ranganathan here to discuss how politicized the sciences in this country actually are. which has gone completely under the radar of this government simply because science students don't come out and protest, but it is a madhouse. I saw it firsthand in IIT Kharagpur, where an alleged BJP, an alleged RSS guy is in charge, but apparently he is one of the worst people you'll ever come across in terms of managing the left and things like that. You've seen that with Mamidala as well with JNU. He's completely at his wit's end. He doesn't know how to manage the left out there either. You don't have the management skills. You don't have the willingness to invest. Think about the outrage that would happen, the Soot Boot Ki Sarkar comments that would happen if you set up an institute like that. JNU was meant to be that institute. Look how it turned out. So it's more a case of, do you have the management skills to do that? And second, there are lots of technology restrictions and things like that. Harvard became Harvard not because of its humanities. Harvard became Harvard because of the sciences. Okay, and the economics. With the amount of quackery you have out here, or what passes off as okay and things like that, tell me, how are you going to protect a university professor from marking down a student whose father is the, I don't know, the future finance minister of this country or something like that? You can't. In America, you can. Okay, so there are a lot of things. Remember, it's not just weapons. You know, I keep saying weapons are just like a Rafale is just the tip of the iceberg. You have to look at the industrial social framework that goes into manufacturing the Rafale. Universities are like that. You maybe can, if you create an absolute legal separation for this, in which case don't set it up in Delhi, set it up in Port Blair, where you create an autonomous legal zone, almost a SEZ, a special education zone, and do it out there. Don't try it in Delhi. It won't work, and a lot of the elements to make a world-class institution there are missing.
Very interesting point you brought up to put the institute in a place like Port Blair. I welcome that, because an institution for learning has to be only that, and JNU has all the wrong priorities. And why can't they shut down? This
was all started by Rajiv Gandhi bringing down the voting age to 18. It should have never been brought down to 18. If you had kept it at 21, 22, none of this crap would have happened. I know a lot of people, I was very excited I could vote at 18, and I thank Rajiv Gandhi for that. But with the benefit of hindsight, it should have never been done. That voting age should have been kept at 21. If anything, it should be increased to 25.
Rahul Varke, a new member, wants to know, hello, do you feel there's a threat of use of biological weapons by any of our neighbors on us? If yes, are we prepared to handle it and respond with a similar device?
No. Remember, we treat all CBRN, so chemical, biological, nuclear, and radioactive devices as you don't have to have a biological for biological response. There are two issues out here which are very important. One is biological dispersible is almost impossible through missiles. It has to be done, through canisters and things like that, which have to be, because it's a living organism. So I think the closest you can come to a biological attack is what China pulled off with the Wuhan virus. And then you have the problem of attribution. To date, you haven't been able to confirm that China did it deliberately or not. So again, how are you going to do that? It's very, very problematic. Attribution is problematic. Detection is also problematic. I remember once we had a big outbreak. There were two outbreaks of plagues during Narasimha Rao's time, I think. The first outbreak was, everybody stocked up on tetracycline or whatever it was, including, I remember we had stocked up tetracycline at home. But the second outbreak which came, which was particularly interesting, and I remember because this came up when our the draft nuclear doctrine, which is not the nuclear doctrine, the one that K. Subramaniam and co drafted, that is not the nuclear doctrine of India. The actual nuclear doctrine of India is that 2003 or 2002 document that the cabinet released. But anyway, the draft nuclear doctrine, one of the reasons they didn't bring in biological weapons is because that particular plague outbreak, it had the signs of the mutation was that it was artificial. And then after a long time, they finally decided it wasn't an artificial mutation at all. It was a natural mutation of the plague. So these are the issues you keep in mind in terms of retaliating, which retaliating to a biological attack is an attribution problem, and it's almost impossible to do. Even for a country like India with a reasonably advanced pharmaceutical sector, it's impossible to do. Also, we are significantly ahead in terms of biology. Look, biological defense is also biological offense. Ultimately, it's a question of how you can divert capacity from offense to defense or defense to offense in a very short time. China, yes, is quite advanced, but our other neighbors simply aren't in that respect.
Next question, H-A-H question mark. I don't know if it's a real name or not. Do you think OTT platform regulation should be done by an independent institution?
No, I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. The problem with these independent institutions is you're basically creating more bureaucratic jobs. It's jobs for the boys. And given this particular government's inability to see friend from foe, 90% of all jobs that this government has given out have all been to Kattarpanthi Congresses. Most of the VCs of universities are Kattarpanthi Congresses. They don't even get that. So I'll trust any government except this government to set up an independent whatever.
Next question, Archit Saraogi. Can you please tell your opinion over the Hindu-phobic teacher of Oxford, Abhijit Sarkar, who is in news for online bullying of a Hindu girl? Have you seen his comments? Pretty vitriolic.
Yeah, I've seen his comments. I don't take them seriously. Yeah, look, if Oxford doesn't take this seriously, if you're not even willing to if the government isn't willing to come in here because it was institutional bullying, then what exactly is this outrage for? Outrage has to have clear consequences. If you really want outrage, go outrage at the foreign minister who hasn't taken it up with Oxford. One of the things I've been saying for a very long time is if people want to go to Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, and all of that, they need to pay a 500% tax in India. Okay, even if they get a scholarship out there, because Indians are a huge source of revenue for all these places, right? What they basically do is social prostitution. You come there, you get a few kicks up the social ladder, and then you've got a name for life. You put a 500% tax on, say, Rutgers, where that horrible woman, Tawdry Busky, is, and things like that. And you see how quickly, the point is you attack the financial, you hit the financial bottom line. Are you in a position to do that? Then don't just ask me what is the point, what is your opinion, what can we do? There's nothing we can do at the moment. We're too weak as a country and our government is too disinterested.
Ashutosh Sharma wants to know, why haven't we made a national level distinction as to what is national and what is anti-national? Do we have some place where we store our own data, since data is the future oil?
No, there are lots of claims that we're going to introduce data localization, but I've personally seen heads up because I used to deal with this issue with the government for a long time. I've seen exactly how compromised government officials working on the issue of data localization are. The government may claim to pass laws, but trust me, in the next 10 to 15 years at least, I do not see data localization happening. Take this as a written guarantee. You can I'm sure PGurus will be happy to give up copyright on this particular 15-20 second segment where you can take a video of me saying, read my lips. The government will not enforce any kind of data localization farce that it passes in Parliament. Okay, and it will be a farce. Make no mistake about it, because the basic functionary organizations of all of this are too far compromised and in the pockets of Google, Twitter, Facebook, and all of that. I don't think you realize how much these people spend on government servants and sending government servants' kids to places like Rutgers to study under Tawdry Busky.
Siddharth Singh wants to know, can we have a tacit understanding with France that they support us on core issues and we support them on their core issues?
We do. In fact, the French are very clear about it. We are a very clear veto on demand. They've told us this over and over and over again. What more proof do you want that without saying so, they're essentially giving you the Rafales knowing full well that they're going to be used in nuclear, this thing. Even with nuclear submarines, they're willing to give us their nuclear reactors as long as we place a big enough order. One of the proposals was on the table was that the Indian government buys half of Areva, or the Indian private sector buys half of Areva. There were a lot of these things discussed during track 2 and track 1.5 that we've had with the French. The problem is, in India, we never take anybody outside the English belt seriously, mostly because our diplomats and our journalists, they can't read any language other than English. They see themselves through the lenses of, The Economist, rather than say Le Figaro or Le Monde or something like that. Not that Le Monde and Le Figaro are much better. Both their correspondents out here are the biggest pricks you'll ever meet, and they stink to the high heavens. If you go to the Foreign Correspondents Club, the moment it starts stinking of a gutter, the French correspondent has come in, because they never bathe. But that's the way it is.
Okabe Joestar wants to know, is Japan a good country to have as an ally?
Excellent country to have as an ally, especially given the way they are moving with their military thinking and things like that. In my interactions with the Japanese, I've seen they're absolutely paranoid about China with very, very good reason. I think the Japanese are the only ones that are taking the Chinese threat seriously. Okay, America only pays lip service to it. It's not taking the Chinese threat seriously. The Japanese are. The Taiwanese do. So yes, Japan is probably one of the finest allies you can have against China. But for that, we also need to get rid of our bipolarity on this thing. That we're also very fuzzy. You used to get washing machines. It used to be called what? Fuzzy logic or something like that.
Right.
Washing machine with fuzzy logic. We're like that. Our foreign policy is all fuzzy logic, no clear stream of thought. So unless we get, and Japan has a very clear stream of thought. They put their mind to things, and then that will be achieved, full stop. And they think way ahead. So they've got more nuclear material than most countries around. And if they decide to go nuclear, they can literally go nuclear in about 2-3 weeks at most, maybe a month. They don't. And they were very clear right from the beginning. Their leadership was very clear on how they were going to stockpile plutonium. They were never going to weaponize, but if the need arose to weaponize, it would happen. And you've seen that with their aircraft carriers. They built those so-called amphibious ships, which we all knew were aircraft carriers, which finally the threat has grown to the extent that they've now said, yes, we're converting them all to aircraft carriers.
Nishtha Tiwari wants to know, don't you think that if laws against hurting religious sentiments are absent, it will make people take law in their own hands, and they will storm the streets, create violence to create justice when it is not given?
No, I think this is where you don't understand that, there's only one community that gets violent when there are no laws against depicting religion in a bad light. One community that gets overwhelmingly violent. Unfortunately, Hinduism has also started behaving that way, which I find very, very disturbing. But the argument you're giving me is not a demand side argument, it's a supply side argument. The basic problem out here is your government, there is zero police reforms in this country, and the police refuses or is incapable or its hands tied back in suppressing violence when it breaks out. That is the real problem. You sort that out, and freedom of speech will only turn against the most intolerant, like we see in France. In France has an excellent police force, and they are like, you can offend any religion you want, full stop. And who's bearing the burden of it? It's entirely the Islamists who are bearing the burden of it. Okay, the Christians don't care.
Question for you. Have you watched the Harry and Meghan interview?
I've seen snippets of it. I haven't seen the whole thing yet.
Okay. So let me ask you.
But from what I've seen, it is absolutely appalling. But, this is what happens when you have, class was enforced in Britain for a reason. There was a thing called low class, cheap class, and there was a thing called high class. And it has nothing to do with caste, it has nothing to do with income, it has nothing to do with color of your skin. You are either high class or you are low class. And this is what happens with unnecessary social mobility. Uh, it's just such a study in contrast that you have the Queen, who went through a lot of trauma in her own. And the serial The Crown doesn't really portray it. I think you need to read serious books about Queen Elizabeth to know the kind of trauma she used to go to, how Prince Philip used to bully her a lot. She shut up, she dealt with it, she fought her own personal battles, and she self-sacrificed for the country. And you look at the second generation, well, this third or fourth generation, whatever it is, of whingy little whiners. I'm not particularly disappointed with Meghan. Who I'm really disappointed with is Harry, because he turned out to be such a complete twat, hiding behind his wife's skirt. But this is what happens. Look at the two children. The Harry has gone the Diana way, neurotic, third-rater, obsessed by looks and external appearances, and I want to care, rubbish. The elder one, William, has gone the grandmother's way. And if you're going to be British royalty, try to be Queen Elizabeth, don't try to be Princess Diana.
Next question. Siddharth Jain wants to know, what is stopping India to put fines as penalties when there is a breach of Indian laws by social media like Twitter and FB, Facebook, when they are openly helping to incite violence?
Well, ask the government that, boss. Why are you asking me? I've been advocating it. If you look at the last 5-6 podcasts I've done, I've been constantly saying, way before, I've been harping on this for the last 2.5-3 years, that these people, I even filed a case against Facebook. Your government doesn't want to do anything. Why do you, get over this unnecessary outrage. The only outrage that you should have isn't against Twitter or anything. It should be against the government that is not willing to do anything to protect you from the violence that they instigate. Okay? Focus on who can change it. Are Twitter going to change because you're outraged? No. Is the government going to change because you threaten them in some way with voting against them or turning a large section of the population to vote against them? Yes. So go ahead and focus on that.
Padmavati Oruganti wants to know, Abhijit, Rafale manufacturer died recently in a helicopter crash. Is there any conspiracy?
No, nothing, boss. Koi conspiracy nahi hai. He wasn't the head of Rafale. He wasn't the head of Dassault Aviation. He was, he was part of the overall group. He was the heir of Marcel Dassault and things like that. I mean, ultimately. But there's no conspiracy. Kuch nahi.
Anirudh Iyengar wants to know, what is your views on the censor board? Should they be even there?
No. Optimally, I would say no. Unfortunately, in India, yes, but they need clearer guidelines, because right now the guidelines are too flaky. But what you need is not a censor board. You need an Office of Film and Literature Classification, which will say this is over parental guidance, or over 12 years of age, over 18 years of age, and things like that. And you need theaters and things like that and bookstores to rigidly enforce those age restrictions.
Next question is from Ishank Sagar. Do you see government and bureaucrats being too vested and have their sons and daughters employed by these OTT platforms, and hence this meek response at a time when countries like Poland are penalizing them? I think Poland again is confusing between social media and OTT, because Poland is not.
But in this particular case, it's fine, because the answer remains the same: OTT or social media. I want you to file an RTI. In the RTI, you will ask how many current serving joint secretaries and above in the government of India, their children are studying abroad. What percentage of that is on scholarships? I think you will get your answer there. Best of luck trying to get an answer to that question, first of all.
I was going to say the same thing, that they are not going to answer this question. Any rate,
And mind you,
Rahul,
you're not even asking for names. You're just asking for percentages.
right, right, right.
This is something that any normal counterintelligence should have done. Because understand, children are the easiest way to compromise a parent. Any country with a responsible counterintelligence, counterespionage unit should be on top of this. We don't even collect the statistics. We don't even care.
Rahul, a new member, wants to know, Biden has included India as a sixth nation in the talks with Taliban. What do you make of this?
He's throwing us a bone. The very fact that he wants Turkey to host it should tell you everything. This man is just compromised through and through. He's not dumb. He's compromised. He's a compromised puppet. And this is a way of reinstating Turkey. Now, watch what is going to happen. These talks are going to be in Turkey, which you know is an intensely hostile atmosphere for India. So India will be pushed to a corner. And Indian diplomats, usually when they're pushed to a corner, either tend to walk out or they tend to cave. I suspect they'll walk out, in which case India will be painted. He's not even given you a bone. He's laid a trap for you. He's laid a trap for you to say walk out. So Pakistan will claim and Turkey will claim that India is being the hindrance to talks. Okay. And what then happens is that that is to say India, will be portrayed as the evil guy out, because Turkey will stack the talks in favor of Pakistan anyway, or in favor of terrorism in whatever form that exists in any way. And this will then be used. Watch, in another 6 to 7 months, I bet you Biden will start saying we need to start integrating Turkey back into the F-35 program all over again. Why? Because they're playing such an important role in Afghanistan and places like that, trying to mediate solutions. Okay, this is the trap that they're walking us into. Understand this. Think 6 months to 3-4 years down the line.
Why can't the United States host this thing? Why do they have to find another country to host it?
You know, I think Prime Minister Modi should announce that we will host talks between the ISIS rump leadership and President Biden and invite him to Delhi. That we will also host a summit of President Putin and President Biden, without informing them, of course, announce that you're hosting it in Delhi. We should also be doing this. We should host a meeting between who's alive. I forget now. Is Ayman al-Zawahiri dead? I forget who's alive in the Al-Qaeda leadership in Iraq.
I think he's.
But we should.
Yeah, he's gone. Yeah.
We should host one between the Americans and Al-Qaeda in Delhi as well.
Right. Okay. Natal Kumar wants to know, what are the best principles for understanding your perspective and building a thought process against the misinformation of both the left and non-left?
It's a mental process. It depends from individual to individual. Look at some of the moderate right handles and the moderate left handles on Twitter. Look at what they're tweeting out. Look at the sources they're tweeting out. Read. I refuse to read newspapers. I just quickly go scan through their websites. I don't even bother clicking in most cases. I prefer reading journal articles mostly. Invariably, I found that even things that I used to trust, like I lost my faith in The Economist sometime around 2009, 2010. But what happens is I don't go by authors or by publication. I just keep, scrounging the internet for whatever I can find on any given subject. And it's very much a question of how good your bullshit meter is. Can you tell that something is rubbish or something is not? And I go to both left and right. I'm very secular with my choice of left or right literature and what to look at.
Vikas Deshmukh wants to know, what is your view on increasing FDI flows and its growing influence on national security?
Repeat the question.
What are your views on increasing foreign direct investment inflows and its impact on national security?
Do it. China built itself based on American FDI,
Money.
right? Yeah. So do
Right.
it. The point is, have a system in place that ensures corruption doesn't happen. It's not the FDI coming in that is problematic. It is the FDI coming in and corrupting your institutions that is problematic. Tomorrow, if you have a complete city renewal project of Delhi and Mumbai, where the minimum height of any this thing, unless you want to stay 15 kilometers away from the center, is a 40-story high flats. You say do it on a build to operate basis to the Chinese. Great, do it. Just ensure that you have basic security precautions and say, if you can make money off it, great, well and good. Otherwise, too bad. Do it. If you can build your infrastructure based on Chinese money, do it. What's stopping you? Have I ever said don't do it? Do it. The point is have a very clear security approach on where the back doors are and on where the human corruption angle comes in.
P. Raghu wants to know, what is your reaction to Sasikala opting out of politics? Are you still in contact with her?
Yes, I am. I love Shashikala auntie. She's such a wonderful human being. But look, I mean, this is a personal question. I'm not going to answer it.
Rahul, a new member, wants to know, you have mentioned India needs to spend about $480 billion on developing human resources. If you hypothetically had that amount, how would you go about assigning that amount? Good question.
Very good question. Number one, you assign it on primary education. And what you do, the first things you do is you figure out what is the job level requirements. Assume that you're not going to be doing high tech, you're only going to be low tech. What are the problem solving requirements of a factory floor workforce? So you compress the syllabus, the kind of shit our students are taught, right? I've seen in the Hindi syllabus and the Tamil syllabus, which I had to read, most of it was literature in arcane Tamil and arcane Hindi, which had no practical relevance today, unless you wanted to become an artist or a something like that, or a poet or something like that, which you really don't. So why are you loading this on? So come up with these lowest common denominator education modules and put most of your budget in primary education. After your primary education, the 12th, invest it purely in the kind of STEM education where you're not subsidizing the whole of JNU, or only subsidizing the science and other streams. Make it research based, have research guidelines for them. So that would be the secondary, but it still remains secondary. If you have to prioritize just this amount, put it into primary education. Uske baad jo aayega. So first delineate the problem set, define the parameters, and then work backwards on it. But the initial investment has to be in primary education.
Fofandi Siddharth wants to know, will WTO liberalize intellectual property rights for COVID vaccine, and will Biden administration be also liberal on the same?
No, and they shouldn't. These are private companies that have put in hard work and hard research to come up with this. Why the hell should they be liberal in it? Absolutely not. And I think, I mean, my personal feelings aside, I don't think Biden will be very open to it. And WTO, almost every country worth its salt will fight it tooth and nail. And that is good. It should not be made, the IPR on it should not be relaxed. No. The private companies have done a stellar amount of work to save your ass during this thing. And essentially this question amounts to, do you want to steal somebody else's
Intellectual
hard
property.
work?
Yeah. Pramod HV wants to know, in order to counter in China, India needs more procurement for its defense. It's an emergency situation. Why can't government create a fund for defense procurement like PM cares
No.
for COVID?
No, you absolutely do not. Wrong question. Even the framing of the question is wrong. You do not need more procurement. You need smarter procurement. Your defense budget is already over bloated. You need a much smarter way of procuring, a much more streamlined way of procuring, and you need to downsize your military to focus on war winners, not on. Unfortunately, the problem with our military now is it seems to be a all-purpose employment scheme. Okay, you have to stop thinking of it as an employment scheme and start thinking of it as a war winner. In fact, you need to cut the defense budget by about $15 billion. At $50 billion, you can easily counter China over the next 10-15 years. It's the question is, where do you invest and how you invest in.
Mandar Karnik wants to know, can India profit from the woke and cancel culture of the USA by attracting NRI business and scientific communities back to India?
No, because NRIs are the biggest bloody wokes. I can't
Hey,
even
hey,
convince my
hey,
own
hey, hey,
family.
hey, you're talking to one. I'm not a woke.
Present company excluded. That 25% that voted Republican are excluded, but the remaining 75% are the worst kind of woke trash you can get. They left India to escape socialism and they've landed up there with socialism. But the problem is everybody's going to suffer. But you're going to see in the next 10 to 15 years is Indian kids are going to be actively excluded from college educations. You're going to see another sort of reservation system, effectively an affirmative action. Remember, reservation is very different from affirmative action. Develop in the United States. The Indian communities in all those countries are going to be the hardest hit, and they deserve to be hardest hit.
What did the children do for the faults of their parents?
Well, this is the huge dilemma. Everybody says the children should not be. Tell me one jurisprudence that says the children can be held accountable for the actions of the parents, and yet in every society they invariably are.
Raghuveer Parthasarthi, a new member, wants to know, what do you think of the world getting ready to again trade with China? There seems to be a collective amnesia on China's role as, and what your thoughts on the recent communist enclave?
Do you remember? Do you remember it was on this very program on PGurus during the thick of COVID? I told you that at the end of COVID, we will forget all about China's role. And with Biden coming, you will forget the role even more. Of course, at that time, we didn't know Biden was coming. But I said if the Democrats come, that role will be completely obliterated. That is what you are seeing. People have all these ideas when there is an actual emergency. The moment that emergency abates, you no longer put in the same amount of effort or future planning anymore. Because remember, effort and future planning, changing your supply chains, creating new supply chains costs money. Very frequently, it's not economically feasible to do so. For example, take rare earths. Rare earths, the entire market is monopolized by China. Why? Because they've engaged in predatory pricing and kicked everybody else out of the market. It's not that China has a monopoly on rare earth reserves. Now, everybody knows this is a problem. Everybody knows this is going to come back to bite them, but nobody's sitting and fixing the problem right now. Why? Because Chinese rare earths are so cheap. COVID is exactly like that. For those 6-7 months when it was a huge problem, well, almost a year when it was a huge problem, they all spoke about it. And I told you very clearly that if Trump wins, yes. If not, everybody's going to forget about China's role. Everybody's forgotten about China's role.
Shashank Sharma wants to know, thanks for your donation, Shashank. Abhijit sir, US carried out strikes against Iran. What will now be the dynamics of a Biden-Iran-Israel relationship?
When did they carry out strikes against Iran?
I think it's not Iran, it is against those people who were actually striking out or carrying out strikes on US positions in Syria. If you remember, in Iraq as well as in Syria,
There are no US positions in Syria. I reframe the question, please, because you need to be very specific about which strike you're talking about, because the strike in Syria were on government targets and they were on irrelevant government targets. It was signaling that, we're just going to hit you for the sake of hitting you. It was signaling to Turkey we support Al-Qaeda and ISIS. So please be very specific in what strikes you're talking about and things like that, because see, each strike has a different signaling value.
Yeah, please rephrase your question and be more specific. Let's go on. We have about 4 or 5 questions and about 5-6 minutes before we cross the 1 hour mark. Are we doing okay, Abhijit?
Yeah, I have to go at 1 hour, but sorry, I have to go at 10, but yeah.
Yeah. So we have 4 questions and then we are not going to take any more questions, viewers. Please save your questions for our next hangout. Abhilash Jayachandran, a new member. What is your opinion on India's capability in catching up with the United States and China in artificial intelligence technology and infrastructure?
Since we're doing rapid fire, the answer is zero.
Chaitanya YSK, new member. Abhijit, should India allow people to choose themselves in which department their taxes should go for, and these taxes will be the budget of the department?
Optimally, I would say yes, but realistically, that's impossible in any government. Okay, simply not possible. Unless you go back to the Chanakyan state, which is only external security, regulatory mechanisms, police, and things like that. So internal and external security and regulation and prevention of monopolies. In which case, the decision's already been made. There's only this that you can go into. And maybe a sort of privilege alleviation, which is to say common education for everybody, common primary education for everybody. But that's about it. For those who can't afford it, a common education cess. But other than that, no, I don't think we should have that. I don't think it's workable in a modern state like that completely. I think the closest you've come to that is probably the UAE. But otherwise, for a big country, no.
Bharati Srinivasa wants to know, Rajiv Malhotra has been out conducting interviews about his newly authored book called AI and the Future of Power, and a lackluster response he gets from the policymakers regarding AI. Any thoughts?
No, I haven't read the book, so I really don't know what he said in there. But as a general rule, I've noticed the government generally tends to ignore anything that doesn't praise them or say that the sun shines out of their ass.
Divyanshu Srivastava, thanks for your donation, Divyanshu. Could you please comment on recent Greek report on JF-17 for its poor avionics and RD-93
Yes,
Russian
look,
engine?
I keep hearing about this over and over again. I've never even heard of this Greek think tank. Or whatever it is. I don't even know what it is. Stigmata or something like I forget now. But it was picked up. Nobody had ever heard of this Greek think tank. Suddenly we pick it up because it reinforces our biases. Though to be fair, everything that is mentioned in that report was previously known. Okay, and I know for a fact that some of the things mentioned in that report are clearly inaccurate, because I happen to know a reasonable amount of how the systems integration of at least the Italian avionics, the Chinese avionics, which China is kind of forced on the Pakistanis right now, I don't know. But the Italian avionics, yes. It was a very advanced integration program. It was a very good integration program because we know in minute detail what the parameters of that program were and how they were meant to happen. Number one. Number two, the thing about the engine is almost entirely wrong. Remember, the MiG-29 engine is bad in comparison to Western engines because it's a metal engine, but it is way superior to the Sukhoi engine in terms of the Sukhoi engine is just a plain bad engine. The MiG-29 engine, remember the kind of maintenance problems we had with our Sukhoi 30s. We never had those with the MiG-29. They're very decent engines, but remember, a metal engine has a shelf life. So after 200-300 hours, as opposed to like 2,000 to 8,000 hours for a Western crystal blade engine, there's a huge difference out there. So there's also the point of view on where you're coming from on that particular report. The third issue with weapons carriage, is it legitimate? Yes. Is it something that can be overcome? Yes. Okay. It was always planned as carrying about 4 to 6 missiles. And 4 to 6 missiles is a lot, boss. As for those, the weapons not meeting their end target, it's not the caliber of the plane that decides it. It's the caliber of the weapon used that decides it. Right. And we've known this as a serious problem with Chinese weapons, that they have targeting issues. They have serious targeting issues. Some of them do, some of them don't. We still don't know the problem of it. Their anti-ship missiles are excellent. Remember, there was an anti-ship missile that got that Israeli frigate off the coast of Lebanon, a corvette off the coast of Lebanon, the INS Khanit. So some of their weapons are pretty decent. We don't know what weapons these guys used, their air-to-ground weapons. It's more of a weapons issue than an aircraft issue. That said, remember, even a reasonably bad aircraft, if thrown in sufficient quantity, is still going to be extremely potent, which is why I said, since you have now decided to go to the Tejas route, that's fine. Damage mitigation is you don't order 80 Tejas. You order about 500-600 Tejas, because 500-600 Tejas, even if they drop out of the skies like flies, will still cause serious damage.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Abhijit, thank you very much for taking time out of your valuable schedule to talk to our viewers and answer our questions. Viewers, today, just to summarize, we started out by looking at the OTT guidelines, and then we moved on to our Q&A. And many of you have sent in questions that perhaps we could not address. Our request to you is send them in the half hour or so before the program starts, and in that way we can address these things ahead of time and have enough planning. I'm going to request Abhijit maybe the next week to put 90 minutes, consider allocating 90 minutes. We'll see how it goes. He's got a very busy schedule too. So again, please join our membership program. We are going to give you more benefits because of that. You will be mentioned as a member when your question gets asked. And thanks for watching this. Subscribe to our channel, donate to our cause. And as always, a pleasure having you here, Abhijit. Well, vetri well. I'm going to precede you this time.
Well,